Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So thank you. You've just given half my talk, but I'll keep going anyway. I don't have any adorable octopuses to show you, but I will show you people. So all living things must move and act in space to survive. Even grasses, even bacteria. When motion ceases, life ends. So the elementary action in space is to approach things that are nutritious and avoid things that are noxious. And this act is replete with emotion. You like the things that give you nutrition and you dislike the things that are noxious. So all thought begins as spatial thought. That's my claim. It's not the entire edifice, but it is the foundation. And as was just said, space is special. It's supramodal. Blind people can navigate often better than I. So many of our senses feed into our sense of space. It's essential to survival. If we couldn't get food in our mouth and get home at night, we'd be in trouble. It evolved long before language, takes up half the cortex, is the basis for other knowledge, which I will elucidate. It's not like geometry or physical measurement. Our conceptions of space are distorted by our perception and by our action, which are linked. And what I will try to show you now is that we use space and the things in it to think, communicate, and create. So we put the world in our minds. And primarily the three spaces we act in: the space of the body, the space around the body in reach of hand or eye, and the spaces that we explore, like getting from here to the hotel, that are larger than we can see and are often we often learn them multimodally from maps, descriptions, and so forth, which can get integrated. So again, these representations are distorted by intertwined perception and action. I won't have time to go into more detail. We also put our minds in the world. And nobody has seen a bonobo draw a map in the sand. But people did it way, way back. Not just maps, instructions, charts. We make sketches. We design out the spaces that we inhabit, social spaces, living spaces, cities. So this I said. So I'm going to give you evidence now for the spatial foundation of thought from brain, from language, and from gesture and graphics. So brain. The remarkable work, this is the remarkable work that won a Nobel Prize in 2012 in O'Keefe and the Mosers, and many other researchers contributed to it. But they found single cells in hippocampus that fire when the rat is here, and a different one will fire when the rat is here. And people have them too, but these single cells weren't spatially arrayed in the brain. What the Mosers found working in O'Keefe's lab is that right next door, one synapse away in grid cells, they were spatially arrayed. It's not a GPS system, as the newspapers like to say, but it is a spatial array. It can be distorted by all kinds of things, like where rewards are. In humans, those single cells in hippocampus that fire for places also fire for people, and the social networks in the grid cells, they fire for events in time, and again, they're arrayed in a temporal space in grid cells, and for ideas, and they're arrayed in grid cells in a conceptual network. And some of this gets replicated in other parts of the cortex. The cortex is highly redundant. But this, I think, does show that the ways we think about space are used in the brain to think about other spaces, abstract spaces. Okay, done with brain. Language. Spatial thinking is ubiquitous in language. I'm going to make you self-conscious about the way you talk. So thinking is a path, and ideas are objects. So we talk about thinking as one thought leads to another. Our thoughts follow a straight path, or they zigzag, or they go around in circles. Our thoughts can wander. Our thoughts can go up, get elevated. We can kick them around. It's a little bit more like hands. So hands act on ideas the way they act on objects. We put them forth, we take them back, we tear them apart, we rearrange them, and so forth, just as we would with objects. And they're often accompanied by the gestures that I was making, which are emblematic of the actions of tearing up or pulling together. Okay, language. So we also use figurative spaces, so we can be out of depth. Someone can be at the top of the class. Someone can be feeling up or fall into a depression. Good things go up and bad things are down, and this is pretty universal across languages. We can grow closer or apart. We can think out of the box. We can open a field. The list goes on and on and on. Okay, enough language in brain. The mind is too small. When thoughts overwhelm the mind puts thought into the world. And people have been doing this for 40, 50, 60, 70,000 years. Even Neanderthals, there's evidence that they put thought in the world. So this is the former oldest map. I think it goes back a couple of centuries BC. This is the current oldest map, and it's this big. It's a stone. It depicts it was found in a cave. It depicts the scene outside the cave. And can you imagine the thrill of an archaeologist walking into a cave, picking up that stone and seeing that it was carved? Many kinds of maps. Coastal Eskimos in Greenland have these pieces of wood that have the indentations of the coastline on them. They fit into a mitten, and if they fall out, they float. Bamboo strips used by South Sea Islanders. The shells are islands. They can't be seen from each other. The bamboo are the currents, the ocean currents, which you can think of as the highways of the ocean. More maps. Ancient graphics also indicate time. This is a stampede, an event in time. It's from Lascaux. Again, these are going back 20, 30, 40,000 years. This is a petroglyph, again, a hunt. Making bread in an Egyptian tomb. The Trajan column, all the conquests of the Romans. You can't see it. Because it's much too tall, but there it is. Time, so not just events in time, but recording time. This was again done in ancient times. And tallies. Tallies, this one goes back 70 to 100,000 years. What they were tallying is unknown. Numbers, as you know, were developed much, much later, and there are languages alive now that don't use numbers, that don't count, but tallies go way back and seem to be widely distributed. So ancient graphics show things that were important to us. People, animals, things like bows and arrow, you find them all over the world. They show place, they show space in map-like things, they show time in calendars or events in time, and they show primitive numbers. And modern graphics do the same. So I'm going to argue that gesture and graphics, I'll talk about gesture now, are direct forms of expressing meaning. They're not like words. Words are indirect, symbolic. The word for table is going to be different in different languages. But if I say coming closer together, you're going to get it no matter what language you speak, or most of you. Okay. So I'm going to show you some videos now of people thinking. These were students. You don't have to read it. You won't be tested. The students were, and they were alone in a room, not talking to anybody. We know that when we speak, we use copious gestures, but they're not speaking to anyone, and they're trying to learn this. This was the first of 4 pages describing where landmarks were in an environment. And I'm going to show you now what someone is doing reading that. So watch her hands. She's not watching her hands. She's reading. She's making a map, a sketch map with her hands, lines for the paths and points for the places. And she's doing it often in bits and doing it again and checking. About 70% of our students do this on at least one of the 4 descriptions we gave them. When they do it, they perform better on the test. So the gestures she's making are helping her think. And they're creating a spatial model of what she's reading. So here's another one. It's how a car brake works. Again, you won't be tested. Let me show you someone reading it. Big gestures. He got it. And he's going to repeat it with small gestures. So he's rehearsing it by using his body to embody what he thinks the car brake is doing. That's not a gesture. So again, when people do this, they perform better on the test. When we make them sit on their hands, they perform worse. So the gestures they're making, which are creating models of what they're reading, are helping them comprehend, learn, and remember. Here's one more. She's studying a schedule, 3 different events that a company has organized, the first, second, and third of each of the events. So again, she's very dramatic. Some people just do it on their hands or on the table, but she's making a matrix, essentially, and putting the events in the matrix. So the hands are making models, and I have hundreds of these videos. The models are spatial. They're direct representations or abstractions of what they're reading, the lines for the paths in the environment, and the dots for the places. So elements, the dots, and the spatial relations, the lines. They're essentially diagrams or sketches, and as I said, they enhance understanding and memory. And you can try it yourself. Try to sit on your hands and explain something to somebody, how to get to your home, how some model works or whatever. Try sitting on your hands and doing it. It's hard. Okay, gestures promote collaboration. These are 2 people who are trying to find a route, and no traveling salesman here. They're trying to find a route, humans, to rescue people after an earthquake. The people who are wounded are collected in various places. And you see, they're only looking at each other's gestures on the map. They're copying each other's gestures. They're taking turns. They aren't looking at the faces. All of that interaction is their gestures on the map. And we ran another condition where people were separated by a shower curtain and had separate maps. They were much less happy with the collaboration. they were much less collaborative, and their maps weren't as good. In fact, they thought they had agreed on the same route, but 30% of the time, the maps were different. Because words are hard even to explain spatial situations, and to explain more complicated ones, words are going to be even less good. Okay, so I've shown you gestures for yourself and that they help you think. Gestures come before words. When we're explaining something, our gestures come before words. Blind children gesture. Blind adults gesture. So again, these gestures must be serving their own thinking. So gestures for others also work very well. There are by now hundreds of experiments showing that if you show a video of someone explaining something, take away the gestures, the comprehension of others goes down. And I'll tell you about one study we ran. We've run several. Gestures are especially important for conveying action, maybe because they are actions. So we taught two groups of people how a car brake how a car engine works. And it was the same script. Both groups got the same script. Some saw gestures that showed the structures. Here's one. So he's showing you that it's round. And another group got gestures that showed the actions of the parts. So you see those two sets of gestures. The test we gave them could be answered only from the verbal script. Nevertheless, the group that saw the action gestures performed better on the action questions. But our other measures showed that they had really internalized the actions much deeper than the people that saw structure gestures. We asked them afterward, after they'd seen the video, to make a visual explanation of the car engine. So that slide shouldn't have been there. Anyway, this is somebody who saw structure gestures, somebody else who saw structure gestures, someone who saw action gestures. They divide the process into the 5 steps. They use arrows, dozens of them, we counted them, and they use bubbles for explosions. So they're really dramatizing the action quite deeply. And so I'm gonna just go back. So seeing the gestures gave them a much better understanding of the actions of the car engine. So gestures help us think, they help other people think. You can think of diagrams or maps as frozen gestures. We draw them on a page and they stay there. Gestures disappear. So we've done some of these same studies showing that visual explanations help people learn and help people communicate. So I'll tell you about one of those studies now. In this study, junior high students were taught chemical bonding. The lessons took a week or two. They used all kinds of methods for teaching the students chemical bonding. Then they were tested, okay? And then we divided them into 2 groups. And half of them were asked to create a verbal explanation of chemical bonding, which is the usual way students are tested. And half were asked to create a visual explanation. So the slide that was out of place, if I can go back there, those are the data. And they really are the data. So before the explanation, before making an explanation, the two groups were equal. After making the explanation, both groups grow up. They aren't reading new material, they aren't seeing any new material, it's just the act of explaining apparently clarifies what they've learned, and their scores go up. But you can see the blue bar, the visual explanation group went way up compared to the verbal. So I'm going to show you more pictures. These are some of the visual explanations. You can see they come from their own minds. They aren't copies of what they've seen. They have sharks that are grabbing electrons. They have a peaceful one. Stick figures are giving electrons. Boiling pots. I mean, these are fun. And again, the people that make the visual explanations do much better. Here's a verbal one, 7th grade handwriting, just one word after another, no structure. It could be about anything. So why are the visual explanations better for the students? They're a natural mapping from meaning to space. They abstract the essentials. They're a check for completeness. Is everything you need there? And they're a check for coherence. Does it make sense? They also encourage inference from the structures that are depicted to function, behavior, action. Okay, so I've talked a bit about maps, diagrams that are meant to be clear. You want a clear diagram to get from here to the hotel, and you want a clear explanation of how to work a ticket machine when you need one. But there are times when sketches, messy ones, are particularly good for thinking. This is Frank Gehry. This is his sketch for one of his architectural masterpieces. I mean, this is a little hard for a construction engineer to build, but I'm sure it wasn't the final one. We did study architects. We studied both newly minted ones and experienced architects, and we asked them to design a museum on a hillside. They loved it. They had a great fun doing it. So this is one of their sketches. And they would make a sketch and look at it and see new things in the sketch, things they hadn't intended. So an experienced architect would see that traffic is going to get clogged, or would see that the light would fall badly in the winter. These are not in the diagram. In the sketch, they take some expertise to do it, but the newly minted ones couldn't make these conceptual inferences, but they could make perceptual inferences, so they could see that at the bottom there it forms a pattern, like a triangle, and they could use that. But all of them got insights from looking at their own sketches, and it was a positive cycle. They'd get insights, make new ones, and so on. They could not talk about what they were doing when they were doing it. It was a conversation between the eye, the hand, and the page, and words got in the way. It's not something they could verbalize. You probably know artists who choreograph or paint or do music. They don't want to talk about their work. It freezes it. And the thinking isn't in words. Okay, and the ambiguity is what promotes the creativity and the insights. And Masaki Suwa and he was my collaborator and did the hard work. We talked about constructive perception, using your perception to get new ideas. And it depends on two independent traits. One is perceptual and one is cognitive, and they're pretty much independent. But people high on both come up with more new ideas. One of my graduate students more or less replicated that work with artists. She herself is a very talented artist and knows a number of people who make their living by drawing. That's the kind of artist they are. And she brought them into the lab, or she visited their studios and videoed them as they were making a drawing. They could draw whatever they wanted. And she was sure they could talk about it when they were drawing, and they said, no, we can't. So she did what we had done, is videotape them, show the videotapes together afterward, and ask them what they were thinking. So again, they said they were making discoveries as they drew, that ideas emerge from the page. So some of the things they say is drawing is creating something from nothing. It enters other worlds. It gets a life of its own. It calms. It's fun, playful. I'm running out of time. So drawings, diagrams, and so forth are cognitive tools. And again, nobody's seen a bonobo create a cognitive tool. They expand the mind. Mind's too small. World is big. They facilitate information processing, convey information, communicate, promote inferences, enable new ideas, facilitate collaborations. Where are the words? All of this happens much too fast. So basketball, thinking with sketches, drawing, gesture, these are intelligent and skilled activities. The processes that guide them are invisible, they're inside, they're interactive, they change with the situation and over time, they're context bound, they don't decompose like words into units that can be recombined, and they're often unique, they're not repeated. So this, I think, is a challenge to AI, to Gen AI. How are you going to get that form of intelligence? Now, somebody may, growing neurons in a lab. So this is the world that nature gives us. This is the world that we design, and we design our world. Put our minds in the world. We make categories, hierarchies, orders on our bookshelves, grocery stores. We have themes in our house. It's another way of organizing the things in the world is by theme. All the things, all the categories we need for cooking in the kitchen, all the categories we need for bathing in the bathroom. So they're organized by themes. We have one-to-one correspondences, repetitions, cycles, embeddings in our place settings, in the buildings that we build. And we have columns and rows in the windows in the buildings. So we create patterns in the world, and when you see those patterns, you know they're done by a sentient mind. And you think infants growing up in this kind of organized world, it's a very different experience than hunter-gatherers, where pretty much the natural world dominated. So then we take those patterns that we've designed in the world and turn them into graphics, into probably the best graphic, most productive graphic of all times, the periodic table. This one, timetable, is probably used more. This is how long it took me to draw and color each of these bars. So we take those patterns and turn them into graphics to convey information. So I invented a term, it's a Latinate term, and Latinate terms sound too rigid and formal, they have no grace. But it's a contraction of space, abstraction, and action. So the idea is actions in space create abstractions. I showed them to you. Those actions get turned into gestures to act on thought, and the abstractions that are created turn into diagrams to communicate. And what we've done is not just design the world, we've diagrammed the world. We live in a diagram, and that diagram constrains our actions and enables our actions. So I'm done a little over time, and I apologize.
Thank you very much, Barbara.